Good evening from the south of Israel. This is Laser Brody. We're pleased to start a delightful new series here on Amuna Hour. This will take us all the way up to the week before Shavuot. We're doing a 6-part series on the Book of Ruth. A lot of people asked for this, and Baruch Hashem, we're happy to do it. We're happy to answer to this. Before I begin, the series is dedicated to the loving memory of Esther Jeren Bas Rochel Malka. It's a young lady in New Jersey who left the world, the physical world, at the age of 16, and she was already spreading Amuna, a suburban girl from Deal, New Jersey. And she's buried here in the land of Israel. Her mother is originally from Ashdod, the land of Israel. And the day before yesterday was her yard site. And so we're sponsoring this in her loving memory. Okay, Esther Jeren Gorsi. So you have to know, we don't need Hollywood or Netflix. And if you want to enjoy a really poignant love story, you don't have to go far. Just open up the Book of Ruth. And you'll also encounter not only a love story, but a deep moral lesson and a social message that you'll never encounter in Hollywood. And Ruth is a book for all times. What we're going to learn that the Torah, especially the Book of Ruth, is anything but chauvinistic. We have in our Tanakh, that is the Jewish rites, it's an acronym of Torah, Nevi'im, Ketuvim, which is the 5 books of Moses. That's the Torah. The Nevi'im is the prophets, and the Ketuvim are the writings. And out of the writings, 2 of the books out of the writings are named after women, the Book of Ruth and the Book of Esther. And as we'll see, the Torah, anything but chauvinistic. And our judges, we had Deborah, we had judges, Huldah, had several judges that were also women. So we find out, not only that, that's the first main lesson, the underlying current of everything, that people think of the Torah as chauvinistic, anything but. See, women's rights is all protected in the Torah. Not only that, but we learn that the message of the Torah is for posterity, everything. The Book of Ruth is not some book where you just go back 21, 22 centuries ago into the time of the Book of Judges. It is relevant for every one of us right now. And we pay close attention, we can all see ourselves in the Book of Ruth. Now, when I begin with what's the modus vivendi behind the Book of Ruth? Who wrote the Book of Ruth and why did he write it? The Book of Ruth was written by Samuel the prophet, and it was written originally as a halachic responsa, as a legal response to, well, sort of explain what the argument was. There was the highbrows, they questioned King David's lineage. If King David's lineage was legitimate. Why? Because King David's a great-grandson of Ruth, and Ruth is a Moabitess. She's from Moab. And the Torah says that the Moabites can't come into can never be converted because of their bad character traits. So Samuel wrote this to teach a lesson. And that's why we ask, well, if the book of Samuel wrote it, why is it not included in the book of Samuel 1? Why is it not included? It's the latter part of the Judges, the end of the book of Judges, before Samuel. And we see because it was not written there are different levels of prophecy. The book of Samuel, everything that Samuel wrote is on a level of prophecy right from Hashem. But since Samuel wrote this relating from his holy stature, but it wasn't in a state of prophecy when he wrote that. The writings of Samuel, the writings of Kings 1, Kings 2, the writings of all the prophets, are in their prophetic mode. But here Samuel wrote the Book of Ruth as a halachic responsa, as a religious law for all times. So let's see what the argument was all about. Now, basing themselves on a verse in Deuteronomy, David's antagonists tried to claim that his Moabitess great-grandmother, Ruth, rendered him ineligible, not only for leadership, but he wasn't even qualified to be a convert, wasn't even qualified to come to the Jewish people. Why? What did they depend on, the antagonists? They quoted Deuteronomy chapter 23, verses 4 and 5, where it says, the Torah says, no Ammonite or Moabite shall come into the congregation of the Lord. Even the 10th generation shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord. And this is for eternity. Whenever the Torah says until the 10th generation, talking about for posterity. Because of the matter that they didn't greet you with food and water on your journey after you left Egypt. Now see what the Torah is telling us. The Torah is telling a message about compassion. Now here we see the Egyptians, that they murdered babies and made them mortar when they put them mortar in the pyramids. If you look at if someone would do DNA on the pyramids, they would find lots of ancient Hebrew DNA inside the pyramids. That the Egyptians murdered babies, threw them into the Nile, threw them to the alligators, put them in as cement in the pyramids. But the Egyptians, after the third generation Egyptians allowed the convert. Uh, Nazis are the Gemara tells us that the great grandsons of Haman were the Nazis, but they're teaching Torah in Bnei Brak. So why the Nazis? Why the Germans? Why the Egyptians? And not Ammon and Moabite? Do we did see anywhere that Ammon and Moab slaughtered Jews? We say one thing: a person could be a murderer, but could take that violence and turn it into love of Hashem. Could keep turn around. But when a person has the trait of stinginess, what's called narrow eyes in Hebrew, a person can't stand when someone else has a blessing. When a person sees someone starving and doesn't give him a morsel of bread, a person sees a down and outer, doesn't give him a coin. When a person has cruelty, and there's such extreme egotism, this is not tolerated in Jewish people, because the Jewish people, they are people of compassion. They're meant to be people of compassion. That's our job. Our job is to bring light, the light of Emunah to other people. Our job is to give to other people, to give. Because as we learn in the Zohar, holiness is giving. The dark side only takes. So when you want to see a person, you don't know where he's coming from. If the person is a giver, associate with that person. If the person is a taker, take a step back. So this is why the Torah doesn't allow an Ammonite or a Moabite. So what's so terrible? So what do you think? They're required to feed an entire guest nation? You have to understand that Ammon and Moab, they are the descendants of Lot. Lot was the nephew of Abraham. Abraham twice saved Lot's life. He saved once in the war of the four kings against the five kings. Lot was taken captive. He was a prisoner in war. Abraham went into battle to save him. When Abraham didn't go into battle to save himself, Abraham allowed Nimrod, the wicked king Nimrod, to throw him into the fiery furnace. He wouldn't defend himself, but to defend his nephew, he went to battle. This is the giving. From the fiery furnace, Hashem took him out. Hashem did a miracle. But Abraham and Eliezer alone, they did an unbelievable commando mission to free the hostages from Syria, one of which was his nephew. That's the first time he saved him. The second time he saved him, Lot didn't want to live with his uncle up in Hebron and learn in his uncle's yeshiva. He didn't want to learn that. He wanted to have a bad life. He wanted to the Las Vegas. He wanted Monte Carlo, which was Sodom at the time. Sodom was the Las Vegas and Monte Carlo of ancient Israel. Lot, he loved it down there. But we saw and what happened to them. They were also terrible character, people with terrible character, people that were corrupt in every single way, corrupt physically, corrupt spiritually, every single way they were corrupt, and it was destroyed. So Lot, he didn't have the merit to be saved, but in order to save anguish to his uncle, Hashem sent three angels. Hashem sent the angels to Sodom and Gomorrah to save Lot. So Lot was saved. So by virtue of Abraham, Lot was saved twice. So maybe stop and think. The people that are hungry and thirsty in the desert, you don't know that Hashem is giving them bread. You don't know that Hashem is giving them water. You see they're coming to the desert. And they offer to buy water from you. They have money. They offer to buy bread from you. No, you won't sell them. Get out of here. These are the people that their great-grandfather saved your great-grandfather. What the gross, not only is this gross ingratitude, the word Jew, Yehudi, means someone who's grateful. So a person that doesn't have gratitude can't be associated with us, not at all. And the basis of Emunah, belief in Hashem, that's gratitude. People have gross ingratitude. Not only did they not give bread and water, but they hired the wicked Balak. The king of Moab, the wicked Balak, hired Bilam, the soothsayer, to curse them. So what did grace, ungratitude, okay, don't do a favor, but curse them? This is why the Torah does not allow Ammon and Moab. Today, there is no pure Ammon and no Moab, but this is in ancient times, because when Sennacherib overran Israel and what was then Jordan, Ammon and Moab, they were mixed up, they were exiled, and so there's no Ammon and Moab today. Okay, the Gemara teaches this, when King David was a young lad, and he came and he wanted to fight Goliath. And all the other officers, the heroes officers, they saw this great Goliath. They were afraid to fight him. Okay, so Saul asked his general. He asked his general, this general Doeg the Edomite. Doeg the Edomite is King David's number one antagonist because David eventually became King Saul's son-in-law. David became one of the lieutenant generals. And Doeg was very jealous of him. So every time he could say slander about King David, he did. So even when he started, when he's a lad, Saul, he saw this young man David, and they asked who he was. They says from the tribe of Judah, from a very good family. He's the son of Jesse, Yishai, and he asked his lieutenant general Doeg. And Doeg was wicked, but he was a scholar. He was a wicked scholar. He used the wisdom of Torah for evil. So King Saul asked him, does this lad descend from Peretz or does he descend from Zerach? These were the two sons of Judah that he had with Tamar. So King Saul wanted to know his lineage. So Doeg Edomi, what he answered, this is the parent. He says, Your Majesty, before you ask whether he's suitable for kingship or not, ask whether he's worthy to be admitted to the congregation. So what's the reason? Because he descends from Ruth the Moabite. So Abner was one of the other lieutenant generals. Abner said, wait a second. He said to King Saul, we learn Ammonite men are prohibited from joining the congregation, but not Ammonite women. Why Ammonite men, not Ammonite women? Women, they don't go, they stay, they don't greet foreigners. They stay in the tent. They were not guilty of this. It was the men that were guilty. And this is the religious ruling of Samuel the prophet that passed down to the head religious court judge of his generation. That was Boaz, who eventually will be Ruth's husband. Okay, so General Abner was an outstanding scholar, and he knew this law from the legal precedent of the high court of Judge Boaz. This came down, this before time. So Ruth's husband to be. So Samuel the prophet conveyed this message in the book of Ruth. And this is what it did, legally binding for all times. And here Samuel brings in very salient lessons that we're about to learn, the validation of King David's lineage. Let's talk a moment about the kindness and compassion and the social awareness that's brought forward in the book of Ruth. Well, Ruth is an ancestor of King David. And consequently, she is the matriarch of the Messianic line because Mashiach, the Messiah, will be from King David. So what's so special that she merits to be? Here she's a righteous convert. And not only that, you have to think where Rabbi Dessler, Rabbi and Mechtav Eliyahu, Rabbi Dessler, he says that there is a starting point. He calls it Nikudat Bechira, where someone who is born the daughter of a big Torah scholar, the daughter of a head of a yeshiva, the daughter of a big rebbe, has a high starting point. And there's someone that is born very far from Torah. The guy could have been a street hood in Seattle. He was a street fighter in Seattle. And he grows. There's a big difference between a street fighter in Seattle that grows to be a Torah scholar and the son of a Rosh Yeshiva that grows to be a Torah scholar. The first is very unnatural. It's miraculous. And someone that did amazing things with himself. And the second is natural. In other words, would be very, condemn the guy if he didn't use the head start that his father gave him. Well, Ruth, if we talk about underdog, and mentioned the street fighter in the slums of Seattle, Ruth didn't even come to that. She was below. She started very high. She was the daughter of a king, but then she became outrightly poor. Poverty is not the word for her. Okay, so here we see that this woman who's so special lifted herself up. Now, what did she do? Look where Ruth was born. Ruth was born into the palace. She was the daughter of King Eglon. He was the king of Moab. She was the daughter of a king. Ruth had anything she wanted, whatever she wanted. But when Elimelech, and we'll learn in chapter 1 why Elimelech and Naomi left the land of Israel and came to Moab, but she was enchanted with these people, and she ended up marrying one of their sons. And her sister, Orpah, who's the great-grandmother of Goliath, she married their other son. So let's say Ruth goes one way, and Orpah goes another way. We'll see all the time a juxtaposition of kindness and selfishness, of good and evil, and you follow the currents in the Book of Ruth. It's just brilliant. There's no author. This is Samuel the prophet. This is in a divine spirit. It's not a spirit of prophecy, but in a divine spirit, divine oriented spirit. Okay, so the book is named after her, and we read it on Shavuot, Rosh Shavuot. Shavuot is both the birthday of King David and the Yortzeit, the day King David died, on the 6th of Sivan. This is the day that Hashem gave the Torah on Mount Sinai, the Shavuot. Why did Hashem give us the Torah? That we should be a compassionate, loving, kind people with loving kindness and concern for our fellow human being. This is number one. This even before, the Torah says that before a person becomes religious, quote, first be a human being. First, the Torah requires us to be human beings. We learn how to be a human being from Ruth. And this is why Ruth merits to be the great-grandmother of King David and the forerunner, the ancestor of Mashiach. And now, there's a message, particularly for women, but for all of us, for all men. We mentioned about the underdog. Most people know that Ruth was a foreigner in the land of Israel. Now, just imagine today that you have a foreigner that manages to get over the border, and they ask who she is, and she's the daughter of Hassan Nasrallah. Oh, Nasrallah? Your father was the head of Hezbollah? Your father killed so many Jews? Yeah. No, but I want to cling to the Jewish people. Can you imagine how she's going to be treated? To go come right in and step right. She's going to be taken to the Shin Bet, to the Israel Security local headquarters. She's going to be grilled. She's going to be tested. People are going to be so suspicious of her. Who would trust her? And to marry her? Marry her? Can you imagine that she ends up marrying the head rabbi of Israel? This is, you say Twilight Zone. What are you imagining? This is what happens in the Book of Ruth. We see that Ruth she clings to Naomi after her husband dies, after her father-in-law dies. Naomi loses her husband. Naomi loses both of her sons. And she's left with her two daughter-in-laws. So she says, my daughter-in-laws, I'm an old lady. You're young. Go get remarried. Go back to your father's palace. Okay, so eventually Orpah goes back. She takes a couple steps. Oh, no, I want to cling with you, mother-in-law. No, go back. A little bit of urging, and she's off. She's off and running. That night, the Midrash tells us, when she left her mother-in-law, if it wasn't the Midrash, I couldn't say it. Orpah was the star of an orgy. And in the orgy participated 1,000 participants, and she was the star. And out of this night, Goliath was conceived. Okay, see, this is where Orpah left. Ruth says, no, I'm going with you. Your God is my God. Your people are my people. Your land. You want to cling. She didn't want to go to her idolatrous back to her home. So Ruth was the equivalent of an alien. She was somebody that came from Mexico across the river at El Paso and comes across about migrant worker. Ruth was way below that, and she hailed from a foreign power. Not only did she hail from a foreign power, Moab, her dad's country, was Israel's arch enemy. And even worse, her father was the king of Moab, enemy of Israel. Her great-grandfather, super enemy of Israel, Balak, the Torah portion named after him, when he and his soothsayer Bilam tried to destroy the Jewish people, heaven forbid. But unlike her forefathers that trace back to Lot, Ruth takes their negative characteristics and she does a spiritual aikido. We know, for example, in mathematics, there's what's called absolute numbers. You take the power of a number, even if it's positive, even if it's a negative. For example, if you take 10 times negative 10, you get negative 10. If you take a negative 10 times negative 10, you get positive 100. This is mathematical law. So how does this work in character? If a person negates a negative character, a strong negative character, it becomes a strong positive character. This is exactly what Ruth did. Ruth negated all the bad character traits in her DNA, the traits that are so bad that the Torah don't allow the men of her nation to come into the Jewish people, and she turned them all around. So Ruth overcame all the stigmas of being an outsider, of being an alien, of being an enemy, of being a Moabitess, and where they were the world's capital of idol worshiping. Not only that, The Book of Kings 2 in chapter 3 tells us that they practice human sacrifice. Sacrifice their children. This is the people that they're evil. Can't imagine to sacrifice human sacrifice. She renounced everything. She renounced everything to do. She wouldn't have anything to do with it. Her sister-in-law Orpah, she ran back. It was also her sister. Her sister was also her sister-in-law. She ran back. But when Ruth crossed over the border, and she and Naomi came back to Naomi's tribal land of Bethlehem, a lot of people were more than a little bit worried. Hey, who's the Moabite girl with Naomi? They all knew Naomi. Naomi's from established family. But Ruth used her own free choice to uplift herself time and time again, and she rose to a moral status and commanded respect and admiration from everyone who met her. People were suspicious of her until they met her. Once they met her, her goodness, her good heart, her kindness, everyone was enamored by her. Now she shows the huge power of Emunah in the way she uplifted herself. She says to Naomi, there's nothing in it for her to be with the Jewish people. She is prepared to be disparaged. She is prepared not to be accepted. Why does she go? All she wants to do is to cling to Hashem. And she sees the way her mother-in-law clings to Hashem. Her mother-in-law wasn't always pleased with her father-in-law's choices. Elimelech forced them to leave the land of Israel. Elimelech was very rich. We'll explain this further next week's lesson. He was very rich. And at the time, it was a terrible time in the land of Israel, a time of famine. And Elimelech didn't want what we call in Yiddish schnorrs. They didn't want beggars knocking on his door 10 times a day. He didn't want to give away his money. So in the end, look what Hashem does. We see this lesson underlying all through the Megillah, all through the Book of Ruth, where measure for measure, Elimelech didn't want to give up $1 of his money to poor people, so he ends up giving up his life. He loses life, he loses sons, he loses home. He wanted to move. It's like what they say in Israel, moving to Chutzla. It's going to move overseas. I don't want the wars here. I don't like the problems and this and that. Looking for the good life. Yeah, leaving the land. This is where the joke is that here in Israel, it's a local call to God. So this is Hashem's backyard, leaving Hashem's palace to go over it. So this is what Elimelech did. Ended up losing his life. Okay, so Ruth shows her huge power of Emunah, where she has nothing to gain, everything to lose, except a relationship with Hashem. She knows she wants to come to Israel. She wants to come to the land of Israel. She wants to walk in the holy lands of Israel. She wants to be the atmosphere of Israel. She wants to be close to Hashem. And by virtue of her Emunah, she believes she could do anything. Nothing stands in her way. She had trust in Hashem, and anything comes her way. She listens to her mother-in-law. That's another one of Ruth's characteristics. She let herself be coached by her mother-in-law, not the older generation, what they understand. What do you understand? You don't know how to dance in the discotheque. You don't know how to use this app. You don't know. You're not modern. No, not Ruth. Not Ruth. She didn't care about anything that was going on. She clung to her mother-in-law. So Jeremiah the prophet teaches us that she became her great-grandson's role model. This is amazing. If we open up the Gemara, this is to learn this in the Gemara tractate Baba Basra, page 91b. Okay, that King David, Ruth was still alive. She lived to a ripe old age. Maybe it's an argument between 120 and 140, depends. But she saw King David. She saw King Solomon. David put a special throne, and it was that Solomon also had a special throne for his great-great-grandmother Ruth. Okay, she saw both. She lived a long life. So she was 40 when she married Boaz. And if we take if Boaz gave birth to Ovid, Ovid gave birth to Yishai, Yishai gave birth to David, David gave birth to Solomon. So talk about another 4 generations. So if you take a 25-year generation, then she lived to 140. If they got married younger, 20-year generation, then 120. But somewhere in the between 120 and 140. Okay, so now we go look into the background. What was the time like in the land of Israel in the Book of Ruth? This is something this lesson will help us appreciate much more once we learn chapter by chapter in the Book of Ruth. which okay, tonight's the introduction. Then we have 4 chapters. We'll learn each lesson a chapter, and then we'll have a final lesson that also will prepare us for Shavuot. That will be the lesson right before Shavuot. So the story of Ruth takes us in the time of the Judges, which stems between 21 centuries ago to 23 centuries ago. And we're talking about the latter time, the end. So we're talking about 21, 22 centuries ago. This was a very difficult time of ups and downs for the Jewish people. The Gemara explains like this. The Gemara explains that it happened in the days of the judgment of the judges. This refers to a generation that would jump over its own judges. They didn't respect the judges. That the judge would say, remove the toothpick between your teeth, and they'd say, remove the beam, the log between your eyes. They were, oh, this is the Gemara tells us they didn't listen to teachers, they didn't listen to judges, and the Jews strayed. And they were strayed, they were punished for that. One of the punishments, as we'll soon see, is famine. So the 400-year span of the judges began after the death of Joshua. As long as Joshua was alive, in the book of Joshua, they won their wars. Everything was fine. Joshua was a continuous of Moses. Joshua lived shorter than Moses lived till 120 years old. Joshua lived till 110 years old. But as soon as Joshua died, things went crazy. And the book of Judges ends with the monarchy of King Saul. And it ends with right before the establishment monarchy of King Saul. That begins in the book of Samuel, which follows the book of Judges. This period was a serious deterioration spiritually to the Jewish people. Emunah was having a rough time. The Emunah that they had coming from Mount Sinai in the time of Moses, in the time of Joshua. Now, there's no more Joshua. It's like the teacher is away and all the school kids, they go crazy. They're crazy. And there was nobody on the stature of Joshua. They were the elders, but they didn't have Joshua's stature. I'm not take away for anyone. But there's a big dip from Moses to Joshua. But Moses' holiness was godly. And Moses personally ordained Joshua. Okay, I don't see a record of Joshua ordaining anyone. So there was no one ordained with a continue from parent, from rabbi to pupil, then exordained. Okay, so this period said was a down period. Every time a judge would arise and restore order and destroy the idols, this would last for a few years, and it'd be a few years of quiet, and then the judge would die, and then people would go back to doing idolatry. And once they did idolatry, okay, Hashem says you want to do idolatry, the nation that you serve their idols, you're going to be subservient to that nation. So you have a choice. I have a choice throughout history. Either we be subservient to Hashem, or we be subservient to the not only to the nations, to the idols of the nations. And the nation would come, and this was a rise and a slip, and a rise and a split. It's like a roller coaster, the book of Judges. So when we meet the characters in the book of Ruth, the land of Israel at that time was in a famine, a real famine, because this is, Hashem says, but according to the Midrash and the Midrash of Ruth, Hashem says, my people are stubborn. They understand. Maybe they'll understand through their stomach because they're not understand through their brain. So Hashem sent them a famine. And the famine, Hashem says, they're my people. I rescued them from Egypt. I can't destroy them, but I have to teach them. And I can't exchange them for another nation because I promised Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Moses that I'm not going to do that. So I have to let them suffer a little bit and cleanse them to famine. We learned something like this. We learn that when we have tribulations in life, it's not a punishment from Hashem. Hashem is a loving father. It's a cleansing. So rather than crying and complaining right away, hey, wait a second. Let me go and speak to Hashem. Let Hashem illuminate my eyes and where I've gone wrong. Where do I need to do tshuva? What do I need to correct? Okay, why do I have a headache? Why do I have a toenail ache? What did I do wrong? Why did it get sand in my eyes? Oh, maybe I didn't look at something that I wasn't supposed to look at. Why did I bite my tongue? Oh, stop and think what you said. Maybe says all the time. When a person lives with Amun and lives with Hashem, he knows that why does Hashem do this? Hashem gives us trials and tribulations to keep us close to him. Hashem doesn't want us to come into the high holidays with days of judgment and to have all this unfinished business, all these unrectified sins. Okay, so they didn't get it. They didn't get it, and the leadership failed. And people, what's a the prophet says, "Ish tachat gafno v'ish that everyone when they came out of Egypt, they came to the land of Israel. They fought 14 years in a war to capture the land of Israel and to get the locals, the idolaters, to get them out, the Canaanites. And now that the land of Israel is parceled out according to the tribes, nobody cares about anything except their own allotment, their own material wealth, their own farm, their material comforts. At least the leaders at the time, the heads of the Jewish court, the Sanhedrin, they were expected to go from one border to another to teach Torah ethics to the populace. And Midrash describes a kind of mobile yeshiva that existed in those early years that which should have been like that. That was their job. They didn't do their job. So as a result, the nation became self-centered, and there are a lot of communities that they didn't have spiritual leaders, and they quickly forgot the Torah, quickly forgot the mitzvot, and they deteriorated into moral corruption, learning not only to get the foreigners out of their land, but befriending the foreigners and accepting their idols. It's crazy. So when a famine hit, it hit Elimelech, the tribe of Judea, but Elimelech was wealthy. Somehow his wealth was preserved, and he had enough land. The Midrash tells us he could have produced wheat. There was, why was he so wealthy? There was still rain in his part of the land. And Judea is very sparse. But at that time, this was a test. You can see a testimony from Hashem. So what did Elimelech do? Elimelech, and he was Jewish and from the tribe of Judah and great lineage. You have to understand, Boaz and Naomi's father and Boaz's father, they were brothers. And Elimelech, who was Naomi's husband, Elimelech and Naomi, he and his wife were first cousins. There's a lot of intermarriage within the tribes, but in breeding and within the tribes, you say, well, wait, wasn't this unhealthy? That the Torah did no, and wherever they practice marital purity, that's not a problem. It's not a problem. So they married first cousins. Abraham and Sarah, he was Sarah's uncle. Sarah's father was Abraham's brother. We see a lot of this in Torah. Okay, so Elimelech and Boaz and Naomi were all three of them first cousins. We will see in chapter 4 of the Book of Ruth that someone in the Levirate marriage that we will learn about that was closer kin to Naomi than Boaz, that he didn't want to commit this marriage. We'll explain all about it. Try to go slowly. But he was also another brother. There were 4 brothers, tribe of Judah, 4 brothers. That was Elimelech's father and Boaz's father, Naomi's father, Ruth's father. So this, we're talking the very, very blue-blooded family in the tribe of Judah. So Shem gave Elimelech all this money. Elimelech, with all his fields and all his grain, he could have fed all of Judea. If he was a compassionate person, a person with charity, had no problem feeding them, plenty of money, but he didn't want to do that. He didn't want to do that. He says, well, I'm going to waste all my money feeding people. What am I? I'm in charge. I'm in charge of those people. So he took all his money. And he went to Moab. He crossed the border, went outside of Israel, lost his money, lost his life, lost everything. So because of his lack of generosity, Elimelech severely disappointed everyone's expectations. People were looking forward, and they said, of course, Elimelech from the family of Judea is not good cause. And when he left Israel, this was a total demoralization. It's like the captain jumping ship. There's a captain jumping ship, and this was, he left with his wife, Naomi. She was forced to leave to her husband's wishes, and his 2 sons, Machlon and Kilion. They married Moabite women, which was Ruth and Orpah. So their names, it's very important to give a good name. Machlon means a person that's susceptible to disease. That's one meaning of it. That's not why they got that name. And Kilion means someone that's going to die a young death. But they use different. This is two interpretations. Got to be careful about giving a name, and especially in the Holy Tongue. Okay, so we spoke about the Moabite nation that they went to. Okay, this is fine because Elimelech is self-centered, and the Moabite nation, they're self-centered. And so they left the family from the land of Israel in famine and financial crisis. And they escaped from responsibility because he's worried about himself, he's worried about his own assets. He takes his two sons, his wife, and they took their possessions, whatever they could do, and they left the nation. So their self-centeredness was critical at a time when compassion and loving kindness and charity was ever so important because everybody needed it. And when everybody needed it, he didn't come to bat. He was the person that was capable of doing it, and he didn't come to bat. So they arrived in Moab and they stayed there. And the sons married Moabite women. Once again, the two daughters of the king of Moab, Eglon, and one's name was Orpah and one's name was Ruth. And they lived there for 10 years. This is 10 years. They left Israel. They lived there in 10 years. Okay, so their decision to leave the land of Israel and avoid helping out Elimelech's family, they had them really spiritual deterioration. Here we go where they know what the Torah says. They know what the Ammon and Moab, and they deliberately marry Moabite women, expecting Moabite traits. Orpah, she was a blue-blooded Moabitess. She was great. She was the great grandmother of Goliath, and Machlon had no problem with that, and Kilion had no problem. But here we see where Ruth is coming from. Ruth is not only correcting herself, but she goes as a Moabite woman. She is correcting the Jewish people. She's correcting the heads of the Jewish people. The most, she is doing what they should have done. She shows her compassion, and she shows her compassion by her deeds. And her compassion, once again, it became the role model of King David, the role model of King Solomon. Both King David and King Solomon saw their great and great great grandmother Ruth, and this is Ruth. So there was no yet a law allowed to enter to let Moabite women into the congregation of Israel because they didn't know this ruling at that time. They didn't know the ruling, so they didn't bother. They didn't bother converting their wives. They didn't want. So it's been still. Hey, Machlon, hey, Kilian, you know what the Torah says about Moabites and what you're marrying Moabite women? So that the Torah said they can't come into the congregation of God, like we said. So after they left the land of Israel, that the Jews were crossing through Moab to get the land of Israel, and not only were they not given bread and water, that they were threatened with war. And they just couldn't pass through. So we're looking at the beginning of the end of the family. As soon as Elimelech and Noah and Nomi and Machlon and Kilion cross over from the land of Israel into the land of Moab, this is the beginning of a 10-year downward slide where they'll lose their money, lose their lives. The only one left is Naomi and her two daughter-in-laws. No more Machlon, no more Kilion, and no more father Elimelech. Okay. So they both die. Both sons die. Father dies. So Naomi's left with nothing, and she's left with nothing. Naomi doesn't have a cent. She's penniless. She was the richest woman in Israel. Look at this. Can you imagine Bill Gates or the guy who's the name of the guy that owns Amazon? Don't remember his name, but then many people with some hundreds of billions of dollars. This was Elimelech, and can you imagine Bill Gates' wife barefoot in a burlap sack? That all she has is a burlap sack from a wheat bag or a bag of potatoes. That's all she has to wear, and barefoot. And this is the way she and Naomi come back to the land of Israel, barefoot and in burlap sacks. So yeah, the burlap sacks, they showed if they'd be long enough, they'd be modest and cover their body, cover their arms, and cover their legs. But can you imagine that from the highest of high down to the lowest of low? And this is the situation where Naomi says, who would cling to Naomi? She's penniless. She's got nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. I have to go back to my tribal land. Maybe my clan, maybe my family will have pity on me. Go back to Bethlehem by foot, not by horse, not by camel, not even by donkey, by foot. Going back by foot from southern Jordan, with today's southern Jordan, Moab, until Bethlehem. Okay, so Orpah, she's happy to run back. She want to stay with the mother-in-law like that. Not Ruth. To see the sacrifice, the self-sacrifice. Ruth is all about self-sacrifice. If you take the word ego and ego-centered, that is the total opposite of Ruth. Ruth doesn't consider herself anything. All she considers her mother-in-law. She realizes the pain of her mother-in-law by losing her husband. She realizes the pain of mother-in-law losing sons. Not only that, she says, I'm the only one my mother-in-law has. She has nothing else in life. And she says, I'm going to go with you. Your land is my land, your people and my people, your family is my family, and above all, your God is my God. Wow, total self-negation. And she heard, she heard that Hashem is now beginning, now that Elimelech died, it's like a correction for the Jewish people. It's like a kapara, an absolution of sin. After Elimelech died, now the rains begin to fall in the land of Egypt. And Naomi hears that there's now grain in the land of Egypt, the land of Israel. Okay, the rains begin to fall in the land of Israel. And Naomi hears that there's grain in the land of Israel. And so she, at least so we won't starve, we'll go back there. And Ruth says, I'll go back with you. And she wanted to send her back. She says, look, follow in the footsteps of your sister-in-law. No, no. She left, and with Ruth with her. So with both, first of all, both daughter-in-laws, Orpah took a few steps, then did a U-turn, went back to the house of royalty and the status of princesses, and Ruth leaves all of that to connect to Hashem, the God of Israel, and to the Torah's values, the Torah's practices, and most of all, compassion, kindness, and compassion. So now she's willing to leave her home, her language, her house, brand new, everything, her culture. And she really loved her mother-in-law. She really loved her mother. She felt she had empathy for her mother-in-law. An egotistic person cannot have empathy for anyone. A person is not ego-centered can feel another person's pain. If a person is so engaged, he's got a whole cage, he lives behind a cage of egotism, lives behind a spiritual husk of egotism, nothing penetrates. That doesn't feel, all he feels is himself or herself. Again, Ruth, the exact opposite. She felt her mother-in-law. Even though Naomi did everything to dissuade Ruth to come with her, she continues. And she didn't know what Naomi says. He says in the first chapter, we'll see this next week. Don't, my daughters, I am bitter and I'm sad for you because the hand of God has come out against me. She knows that Hashem says. She didn't complain. She just stated a fact, the hand of Hashem. Naomi, she's from a good family. Naomi's from an Amunah family. And she knows she did the wrong thing, but she had to follow her husband. So Ruth, what does Ruth act like? Ruth doesn't act like a Moabitess. We see the character traits of Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, our matriarchs. She comes right, a continuation of our matriarchs. And that's what the Gemara in Tractate Baba Basra says. That Ruth, she said, a continuation of her mothers. And when in the book of Kings 2, where Jeremiah the prophet said that there was a throne for the mother in the king's palace, that right away, Rashi, they're talking about Ruth. That Ruth was the mother of Messiah, the mother of kingship, the mother of monarchy. Ruth is considered the mother of monarchy. That's and even we have our matriarchs, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. We talk about the monarchy. Who's the mother of monarchy? That's Ruth. Look where she took herself from, because Ruth is the icon of compassion. She is the archetype of kindness, goodness, emunah, you name it. She's right here. And that's what we're learning the Book of Ruth for, to learn emunah and applied emunah where it is altruism and charity and goodness and believing that everything comes from Hashem. And when I believe that everything's from Hashem, when I would give to a person, Hashem is going to punish me for giving a poor person to help someone else, to help another person. And heaven forbid, the exact opposite. Hashem is testing us. He's testing us. Will we give our tithe? Are we too stingy? There's a story in the Gemara about, from this time, there's a story in the Gemara about a family in Judea, And the father was very charitable, very careful about giving tithe. It's in the Jerusalem Yerushalmi Gemara Yerushalmi, and in Masechet Peah, Tractate Peah. And this religious farmer, this Emunah farmer, he had a field, and the field would say, give 1,000 bushels a yield. And he would give religiously 100 before he touched his own wheat. He would give 100 bushels to poor people. Made sure his tithe and be exacting about his tithe every single year. So his field gave 100 bushels. It's more like 1,000 bushels. Yeah, it was 1,000 bushels, and he gave 100 bushels his tithe to the poor people. Okay, so this farmer died, and he left the field to his sons. And the first year, the field again gave 1,000 bushels because last year the father tithed it, and they saw the 1,000 bushels, and they say, 100 bushels, 100 bushels. That's a lot of wheat to give away. The poor people, let them suffice with 50 bushels. Well, the next year, since they only gave 5%, they got half the yield. Instead of 1,000 bushels, they only got 500 bushels. And now they have 500 bushels. We can't give 50 bushels. That they give less and less and less and less until the field came. By the time after a few years passed, and the field was only giving 10% of the yield that they had in the father's time. So the father, when he was giving a full tithe, the field would give 10 times more than natural. But now they don't want to give a tithe. It'd be natural. That's what Hashem does. When we are charitable and we're kind and we do loving kindness for other people, we do charity for other people, we act like Ruth. We get it back with big dividends, big dividends. Tzedakah, charity, it's one of the greatest investments. Just like a person has to know how to invest in the material world, to make the right investments, you have to know how to invest in the spiritual world, knowing the right charities and doing the right thing. This, again, we learned from Ruth. Ruth knew how to invest, and she invested in her mother, in her mother-in-law, and her mother-in-law became her Emunah coach. And she came in because now that Naomi was back in the land of Israel, Naomi was back in Emunah mode, and she lost all her possessions. She had nothing but Hashem, and it was a different thing. Naomi now, by way of Ruth, and we'll see after Boaz gets married, Naomi rebuilds herself. So Ruth exhibits also the trait of Bina. Bina, this is something, Bina is literally, it means understanding, Chochmah, Bina, and Dat. It's one of the Kabbalic spheres, but is more than that. It's insight. Ruth has an unbelievable woman's insight. We see the woman's intuition. That men, sometimes a woman can see something. A guy comes home with a guest for dinner, and the wife really doesn't like that guest. So what do you mean I don't like it? That's my future business partner. I'm into business. And she says, no way. She stands on her hind legs. You're not going to go into business with that guy. So what do you mean the guy's got this qualification? She doesn't know why. But what Hashem rings her bell, why? Because women are naturally, they don't have the thick skull, the spiritual thick skull that men do. For a woman, it's easier to learn Emunah. For a woman, she picks up a book of Psalms. She can, 90 seconds, she'll have tears in her eyes. For a man to cry when he's reading Psalms, he's got to get his head with sledgehammer. Ruth is the tremendous insight and Bina, and she expresses this deep caring and kindness that we don't see anywhere else. Once again, it's the complete opposite of her countrymen, and this is stressed. The Book of Ruth stresses this all the time. So you can't give the excuse, oh, I was born in a rough neighborhood, I was born with abusive parents, I was born here. No crap. You have the free choice to pick up the Torah, to learn what's in it, and to do with yourself whatever you want to do. And this is what we learn. We learned that we could get close to Hashem. Sky's the limit. There's no limit. Okay, so what does Ruth say? She says to her mother-in-law, don't push me away. Don't push me away. And don't make me go back. For wherever you go, I will go. And wherever you sleep, I will sleep. Your nation is my nation. Your God is my God. Where you die, I will die. It's dedication. That's going to be buried. In other words, mother-in-law, I'm not going to leave you until our last breath. That's it. So the only one, and she swore, she made an oath. It is so moving. The only one that's going to separate between you and me is Hashem. And we'll see this all next week in the first chapter. And this is Ruth's famous statement that your God is my God, where you go, your people are my people. And the Midrash tells us that it is not only her declaration of what she believes in as far as charis and loving kindness. This is her declaration that she wants to join the people of Torah. She wants to join the people of Torah. And no matter what, she doesn't care what happens. So Naomi sense her sincerity. There's a law that not supposed to say somebody falls in love with a Jewish person, and Jewish person says, I can't marry out of my religion. Let's say, okay, I'll convert. But they convert for an ulterior motive, not because they want to cling to the Torah or because they want to marry a certain person. They're not allowed into the Jewish people. But if they're sincere, they're not looking for anything to gain. All they want is Hashem. All they want is Emunah. This was Ruth. And Ruth gave up everything because one thing the Midrash tells us that Naomi was trying to discourage her. She says, you know something? It's not the Moabite girls. They go to what then was the theaters and circuses of idol worship. They would have circuses where, like I tell you, circus, all kinds of entertainment and clowns and comedians and whatnot, and commercials, idolatry commercials, just like you're watching a show. And they have an entertainment variety show. There's all this variety show, a live variety show with commercials of live, and this was very popular in Moab. And they would do this in the outdoor stadium. And Naomi says to Ruth, this is character your people. But she says, daughters of Israel, they don't go to theaters and they don't do idol worship. And that's when Ruth says, wherever you go, I go. Your people are my people. And that's it. Where you sleep, I sleep. In other words, if you don't do it, I'm not going to do it. So Ruth is making it perfectly clear to Naomi that she's accepting everything. She's leaving the old habits behind and she accepts the new good. So here she comes to wipe away all the bad and cling to the good. So on that day, what happened? Look what Hashem is doing. Look at Hashem's timing. On the day that Ruth and Naomi arrived in the land of Israel, they crossed over the border. They arrived in the land of Israel, and they were walking up the hills to Bethlehem. On that day, when they arrived to Bethlehem, you know what went on in Bethlehem? There was a funeral going on. You know whose funeral it was? It was Boaz's wife. Boaz's wife died on the day they returned. And so the Gemara tells us that the sun rises, the sun sets. It's like one new regime and the old regime. There was time for Boaz's wife. This is from Hashem, perfectly orchestrated, so we can see in everything we look hard enough, everything we see in the Book of Ruth, we'll see it teaches us about divine direction, hashkocha pratis, just what we wrote about in our book, Divine Direction. And they see that here Naomi comes back, rich Naomi, right? Bill Gates' wife, rich Naomi, she comes back. She's wearing a burlap sack. She's impoverished. She's skin and bones, and she's barefoot. She's got this Moabitess girl at her side, and they're horrified. They're shocked. Is that you, Naomi? Is that you? I can't believe it. It looks like Naomi. Is it Naomi? And she says, I'm not Naomi, I'm Mara. And Mara in Hebrew is bitter. Well, we'll see this. So they settle back in Israel, and everything that happens to them, we'll see this in chapter 1. And we'll begin to see now the story of the Book of Ruth. We have the background that Ruth came from being a wealthy princess to a poor immigrant back to becoming the great-grandmother of kings. And Baruch Hashem, it completes our introduction and gives us the background where we can appreciate what we're going to learn next week. B'ezrat Hashem, next week we begin chapter 1, and the Book of Ruth is gripping right from the beginning. Okay, so we look forward to seeing everyone in chapter 1, and we hope you have a wonderful week.